Serious. What event in your life still fucks with you to this day? Story 1. There was a girl next door to my grandparents' house that I had the biggest crush on. Her name was Becca. We'd known each other from the time I was really little. We were both coming into the age of liking the opposite sex at the same time, and we had similarly troubled childhoods. Becca lived with her grandparents too. Somewhere after holding hands but before our first kiss, Becca gave me a ring. She borrowed it from her grandpa and needed it back the next day. I was on cloud 9, and with excitement, I showed my mom the ring. She asked my grandparents to borrow their truck and told me to get in and make sure I brought the ring. I had no idea what was going on. So we pulled up to the jewelry store at Eureka and Telegraph, and she asked to see the ring. She went inside, no kids were allowed, and came out about 20 minutes later. Then we went to McDonald's, the first time I'd eaten anything but food pantry food in at least a year. She said the jewelry store needed to borrow that specific ring for a few weeks to clean it up. I asked what I was supposed to tell Becca had happened to it, and she said to tell her that I had lost it. I never saw the ring again, and Becca never talked to me again. Story 2. My father was in a hospice dying from cancer. He had stopped eating and was barely communicative. We knew it was just a matter of days. Mom and I went to visit him every day for a few hours so he wouldn't be alone. One morning, we get a call. Fearing the worst, I answered it, expecting them to let us know he had passed. My father was on the phone and he sounded, he even said he was hungry and asked for breakfast. He told me he was looking forward to our visit. I was stunned. Had all these emotions and thoughts. Maybe it was a miracle and he was going to beat this. Hopped in the car and started driving over. Got another phone call. This time it was the hospice folks. He just passed. The roller coaster of emotions from that morning haunts me. I was numb for a long time. There was a period where I thought maybe I just hallucinated and never spoke with my dad at all that morning. And to put my mind at ease, I met with a hospice nurse who was with my dad that morning. She explained this concept called terminal lucidity. She says it's not uncommon at all and is usually a sign that someone will pass soon. And that helped, but it still haunts me. Story 3. Was a normal Friday. I'd taken an early day to help my father with haylage. Earlier that morning, my father brought my mother to the hospital because she was dry heaving a lot. When I got home, the home phone rang and I picked it up. They said it was a hospital and that they were going to transfer her to a bigger hospital because she had just had a heart attack. So I tell my father and he goes to the bigger hospital to fill out forms and stuff. 3 hours later, I get a call saying that they are going to airlift her to the city with the best cardiac doctors. So I started to pack bags for everyone. Then my father calls me one more time to tell me to go get my brother from his pre-prom party because mom's not going to make it. So I'm driving like a bat out of hell trying to find my brother's party. Then I speed all the way to the hospital praying that the cops have a huge drug bust or something. I get to the hospital with my brother and we see our father outside the room crying. My father is an emotional man when it comes to death. I've never seen him cry so much. I look to my right and there are 7 people in my mother's room, doctors, nurses, and the helicopter crew that was going to transfer her. It was about 45 minutes it felt like, and they said there was nothing else they could do. My mother died that day without a warning. Story 4. When I was 16, I was on my way to take my SAT on a Saturday morning. I pulled up to a 4-way stop on a quiet street and looked in both directions. Glanced to my right and saw a car way down the road. Didn't look for more than a second and thought I was good since he had to stop at his stop sign. I entered the intersection and looked to my right again and the car is already at the intersection. He was going 55 on a 25-mile-per-hour road. He was not stopping. Time slowed down as I realized, he's about to T-bone the side of my tiny pickup truck. So I look away from the window to keep my face safe from any potential flying shards of glass. I white-knuckle grip the wheel and just hope for the best. He flipped my truck and I rolled onto my side and nailed a telephone pole with the top of my truck. As I'm laying there on my side, I'm feeling all over my body, just expecting to be badly hurt and just in shock, but amazingly, my worst injury is a scraped elbow. This was nearly 10 years ago, and even today I drive like a grandma when it comes to intersections. I'll wait an extra few seconds every time if I feel like a car is approaching too quickly. There have been times when a car is coming up quickly and my heart rate will skyrocket because I think I'm about to get hit again. I've never trusted another driver ever since that day, and being that defensive has never steered me wrong. On the bright side, the guy who hit me immediately called the police, then shoved his shirt through a crack in my door so I could cover myself while the cop broke the window and pulled me out. He broke several bones, admitted fault to the police the second they got there, and personally apologized to my hysterical mother and me multiple times. As shitty as it was that he hit me, at least he wasn't a person. I still took my SAT too. My hand was shaking from adrenaline the entire time. Story 5. When I was a child, I received an invitation to a birthday party. It was handwritten and given to me by the kid whose birthday it was. When I got there, he pretended not to remember inviting me and asked to see the invitation. He denied writing it in front of many of my classmates and said I invited myself. I was so upset that I wanted to leave immediately, but my mom had already left. So I explained what happened to his mom so she could maybe drop me off. Luckily, his mom recognized his handwriting and was clearly angry at her son for being a bully, so she gave me some Lemingtons and a soda and told me I could go play video games by myself until my mom picked me up. That was the day I discovered that none of my classmates were my friends. Story 6. I still remember in grade 4, this girl invited everyone to her birthday. Didn't really know her. She was a bit of a bookworm, very smart, very loud personality who wore glasses, sat up at the front of the class. The week of her birthday, she kept asking everyone, including myself, almost every day that week, whether we'd be coming. I didn't want to have to face her at school the following Monday, so I begged my dad to take me to her birthday party, which was held in a very rural part of outback Australia. And when I showed up, I was the only person she invited who made it. At first, I was a little annoyed that nobody else showed up and so felt betrayed that I'd have to face her on my own and was tempted to leave. But then I started to feel really sorry for her. The smile on her face and her family just to have someone show up to her birthday party, I'll never forget it. They made me and my dad feel really welcome. We played all kinds of cards and party games, ate plenty of food, and left with a lot of leftovers. After that, we became great friends until about a year later, I left for another school in the big city. I don't know whatever happened to her after that, but I hope she's out there now, doing well, happily married and all that. Story 7. Asking my parents to take me to the hospital and being dismissed by them. A few years ago, I ended up falling suddenly and aggressively ill with what I now know as sepsis. I thought I just had a cold, but it wasn't going away. I was more afraid with each passing day and decided to go to urgent care. The labs the techs took for me alarmed them significantly and they urged me to go to the hospital, so whatever I had was pretty severe. I was terrified, exhausted, and nearly delirious, but couldn't drive myself to the hospital. I asked my parents to take me, and they immediately became dismissive. I was blowing things out of proportion, and they decided I should wait until the next day to see my doctor. My dad told me I could drive myself to the hospital, but he wouldn't support me in doing it. I spent that night just crying and staring at the ceiling. I knew I was dying, but my parents chose to dismiss my fear and concerns. I prayed to God to let me live through the night and asked why my parents could do something like this and still sleep at night like nothing was wrong. I wanted the pain to end and I had to beg them to take me to the doctor the next day. At the appointment, the nurse yelled at my mom for ignoring what urgent care said the day before and for waiting to take me somewhere to be seen. I will forever be thankful to that nurse. The doctor made his diagnosis and basically said I was 1 to 2 days away from death and I needed to be hospitalized ASAP. This kicked off a nearly 1-month hospital stay that required me to get open heart surgery because the damage had been done. While in the hospital, I asked them why they didn't believe me, why they neglected serious health issues time and time again. This wasn't the first time they dismissed something serious, whether it be weight or broken bones. They didn't have an answer for me. I guess my nearly dying in the hospital finally made them realize their mistakes. I know they're traumatized from the ordeal and have tried making it up to me. Sometimes I'm okay and I can talk to them like nothing changed, but I will never trust them again and I don't think I can forgive them. Sometimes the disdain and hatred I had for them while they let me suffer came up and I can't stand to even look at them. I've since moved out and they notice I don't come by to see them very frequently. I have PTSD from that night, wondering if I would die while they waited to take me to the hospital, and on those days, I just can't see them. I hope I can recover from that day one day. Story 8. I was raised Mormon and hands down my 2-year Mormon mission. As a kid, you sing songs like, I hope they call me on a mission, and you're told it is the best 2 years of your life. You hear amazing stories from your father, uncles, grandparents, cousins, and teachers at church about the fun they had and about the miracles they saw, and so you get ready to go. You buy suits and shirts and ties and slacks and shoes. You see, the total bill makes your parents' eyes water. You see, they can barely afford to keep you and your 8 siblings fed, so $2,000 for cheap suits, 10 shirts, and nice shoes is a massive sacrifice. But it's all for God, so you know it's right. You get to the Missionary Training Center, MTC, and are surrounded by thousands of others just like you with a shared dream with similar family stories. You're taught to be perfect. You're taught that if you're not perfect, it's your fault when you don't baptize the people in your assigned area of service. And so you forget yourself and go to work, yielding your personal needs to the whims and instructions of the church of your mission leaders. You get to your assigned area, I was in Central America, and quickly realize that it's much harder than you were told. It is not safe, but your companion helps you learn how to identify gang members and keep clear of them. You thank God you're in a religious country where people may disagree with you, but ultimately don't bother you because you're a Christian missionary. One day, when you are teaching a lesson about God, you hear multiple gunshots from out front, 3 houses down, followed by a speeding car. The lesson is over, everyone needs to know who just died, but everyone is too afraid to go outside just yet. You learn that the people killed in the drive-by were mistaken for the intended target. 2 innocent people died because they were sitting on the wrong stoop. You quickly learn to identify if that bang you just heard was a gunshot or a firework. Lessons of perfection are constant. You believe you are a failure because you aren't seeing the success others are. You don't realize until years later that this is a sales job, not a service opportunity. You have enough money to feed yourself but often go hungry because the required schedule doesn't allow for dinner until 9:30, 10 p.m. and you're walking 8 to 15 miles a day. Your companions hate you. You want to be a good missionary and be obedient and work until you can't anymore. And they have boundaries, but you don't. You were trained out of them. They hate your freaking guts. And you feel so alone. The mission president is not kind or loving. He never talks to you unless required. He only calls you when you email him to say your companion threatened to beat you up. You feel so alone. You are alone, chained to someone who hates you. For every new assigned companion, you hope for someone good to work with. With every new assignment, your heart sinks. It's another problem missionary, and you're babysitting again. You feel so alone. You cannot call your parents except at Christmas and Mother's Day. You can send them one email a week. You are told to never share negative stories lest your parents worry for you. You don't tell your parents about almost being mugged by a drunk gang member. Thank God for those kids who pointed you down the alley to get away quickly. You worry about how your parents can afford to pay for you to be there. $400 a month is a lot of money when there are so many mouths at home to feed. You are grateful for the financial help others in your community are offering to pay your way. Years later, you learn that your mission president has all his expenses paid for, including a penthouse in the right part of the city, food, flights for kids to visit, gifts for kids and grandkids, and more. A bat gets into your bedroom through the 4-inch gap between the wall and sheet metal roof. Tarantulas and scorpions make regular appearances in your home when it rains. You serve your 2 years and go home. After 2 years in Central America eating beans and rice, you go to Costco and have a nervous breakdown at the excess of America. You spend $1,100 on a new computer so you can go to college, and you feel immense guilt for taking care of yourself. It's been 10 years since I got home, and I've spent countless hours in therapy dealing with it. I hate the Mormon church so much. I hate what they do to kids and how they take advantage of youth. Story 9. At the age of 15, I had 2 metal rods and 14 steel screws surgically attached to my spine. It was a 12-level spinal infusion, which is easily the most painful experience of my life, especially considering one of the 5 IVs I had was folded over, so I didn't get morphine for the first 24 hours. At 21, I was working at a hospital when a patient began sliding off a bed. She weighed around 400 pounds and had one leg and was useless to help herself. On instinct, I dove in to catch her upper body. 1 steel rod and 1 screw snapped along with the fusion, which is now solid bone tissue. The breaks happened on 2 separate levels and left 2 sharp metal ends stabbing the tissues around my spine. The workman's comp doctor never looked at the x-rays, and it was a full 2 years before we discovered what had actually happened, and after 3 trips to the ER. The injury and resulting surgery left me with permanent damage, and I lost 80% of my work functions, meaning 80% of what I could do on the job, I couldn't do anymore. That was 14 years ago. I'll always walk with a limp. I'll never do 95% of the things I really want to. Since COVID kicked my ass, it's difficult just to move boxes or mow the lawn at home, let alone find a full-time job. So that would be my answer. And for those in the medical field, anything over 50 pounds simply isn't worth it. You could spend the next 80 years a crippled, depressed mess with more medical debt than you can keep track of. Story 10. I was fast asleep and was suddenly woken up by the sound of loud hums broken by giggling. I look over and there's my husband in some kind of trance, humming and giggling in bed. I shake him, no response. I turn on the light and he doesn't flinch but begins flapping his arms. He's not a drug user, but I had just gotten home the day before from a 2-week-long work trip and noticed he was acting really strangely, rhyming words when he talked, but now it honestly looked like he was high and was completely unresponsive. I call 911 and the paramedics come. Over that time, he slowly emerges from it and starts talking. His blood pressure is 180 over 120 while sitting quietly. He's a healthy guy in his 30s. They insist on taking him to the hospital. We spend several hours there, and over that time, he begins freaking out at me for calling 911. We're in Canada, so it's free. He takes off his wedding ring, throws it in the garbage, and tells me I'm a horrible person. He never wants to see me again. That's when the nurse sits me down and tells me what's going on. Bipolar disorder. He's in deep mania and is psychotic. They involuntarily admit him, and he spends the next few weeks coming down from it. At that time, I grieved as if I had watched him die. Watching your partner go completely psychotic is so heart-ending. They're just totally gone. Their body is there, but they are not. It took me a long time to recover. He's now, after 2 years, stabilized on the right meds. He's able to hold down a job and he's back to his whole self, and we've talked everything through. It's a cruel disease, but treatable. Story 11. I went quadding with a man on our second date. On the ride home after an awesome day exploring the mountain, he lost control of the quad and we went off the logging road into the trees. A tree fell on my leg, pinning me down. My date, who took a tree to his skull, fell backward onto me. I wasn't able to move my entire body, trapped under a man I believed to be deceased. We were hidden in the trees off of a low-traffic logging road and my cell phone was far out of reach. I remember watching the clouds pass overhead thinking I would die out there, a slow, painful death. It was terrifying. I screamed for the guy to wake up. He eventually gained consciousness long enough to pass me his phone. I called 911, attempted to stop his bleeding, used some adrenaline super strength to move the tree off of my leg, and crawled out to the road. We both spent weeks in the hospital. My leg was severely broken and I was hypothermic. He broke his neck, arm, and multiple skull fractures and brain bleeds, yet survived. This happened 2 years ago, and it feels like it was just yesterday. Story 12. My brother died almost 2 years ago now. The last day I spent with him was one of the best days of my life. The next day, he went out riding four-wheelers with his friends and flipped over and was airlifted to a hospital 90 minutes away from where my parents lived. He wasn't wearing a helmet when we told him time and time again to wear one. 9 days later, I held his hand and told him goodbye after my mom explained he caught pneumonia that basically put his body into shutdown. He was 20 years old when he died. He turned that age just 5 months after his last birthday. Way too young. I was 2 weeks from being 19. Now I'm almost 21, an age he'll never see. I get to get older while he has to stay young forever. I'll never get to see him get married and start a family, and he'll never get to see me do the same. Now I'll have to explain to the children I'll yet to have that their uncle is not alive, and how I'll basically have to pound the message of loving your siblings because you never know into their heads, and how I now have to be overprotective of them when they go out on bicycles, four-wheelers, or anything really that requires a helmet, and be made the bad mom because you never let me do anything I want to do, all because he was taken too soon. I don't blame either him for not wearing a helmet nor the hospital staff for not trying more with him. As much as I want to, I can't. I only blame myself for not spending more time with him and taking him for granted a few times. I'm the youngest of two kids. I hate being an only child.